Welcome to the Vision Gap Show. Align your big idea and vision with a plan of action to resonate and stand out in your market. With your hosts, Andy Halko and Tony Zayas.
All right, and welcome to another episode. We're going to be diving in. As we have kind of putting these pieces together, today we're going to be talking about offerings. To date, I'll just review real quick. We've gone over ICPs and personas. We've talked about analyzing your competition. We've talked about your core values. Last session we did vision, and today, again, we're talking offerings. So, Andy, something I've seen you do in working with clients is you do a really nice job of taking sometimes very complex set of offerings and helping to tie them together, sometimes by developing hierarchy amongst products, things like that. What is typically your approach to that when you're working with a client? How do you look at offerings?
Yeah, it's such an interesting thing. I work with so many different clients, and it's an interesting challenge that I don't think that they often see it from an outsider's perspective. And I know we've said that a lot here when we talk about strategy in general, but stepping back and thinking about the person that is looking to buy, that doesn't understand anything about your organization, may or may not have different knowledge about what you do or what they're looking for. And sometimes there's the instinct to just put it all out there, and you see folks with these big laundry lists and walls of offerings. Sometimes it's just illogical because in your head you're following how you do it internally, but you're not thinking about how someone might understand that from the outside. And so it's amazing. I would say 9 out of 10 clients that I go into, the way they present their offerings is not logical, not intuitive. It's really difficult for someone from the outside to come in and understand, and they don't see it. And so I think that is a huge barrier to people going through the process and wanting to actually buy what they do when they can't even get past the conceptual, the high-level conceptual, what is it that this company does?
So much of everything that we're talking about here with positioning, messaging, the whole brand strategy is all about lining the pieces up correctly. And so if you're going to tell the overarching, and we're going to get to that, like value propositions and a lot of that stuff in the coming shows that we'll be doing, but if you're going to do that properly, that alignment is so critical. So you have to be able to tell the story within the offerings, kind of, if you're telling everything is about congruency and everything working together. So that's certainly a challenge, especially when you have.
And I think that's the place to start is hierarchy, right? You kind of led into that, and I didn't quite answer it even, but at the end of the day, that is kind of that first step. It's not even about the messaging for the offerings. It's about creating a structure that's intuitive. And I mean, it can even go back to the simple, what people know with presentations, like the 3x3, right? I like to look at it as how do you create these logical groupings that have a minimum of maybe 2 groups to 6 at most. And then underneath that, you're looking at 2 to 3 things. And so whether it's a product and you've got these major functional sections that then have primary features, or it's a group of services where you're kind of bucking them into 3 groups, and then there's some sub-services. Doesn't matter what you're selling. It really is about that hierarchy and just creating something, again, that within 2 seconds that someone goes, I get it. I see how all this fits together, and probably the biggest place that you can see it is go to the menu of somebody's website. And if you're hovering over some pieces and they use a mega menu or they don't, and you can't intuitively understand everything that they do within 2 seconds, they are not presenting their offerings in a logical, structured way.
Yeah, no, that's a good example. Just having that like relational context of how the different pieces relate and work together. It's all a puzzle piece, like putting it together. But that point on hierarchy is fantastic. So a piece of what we have in Frictionless is the offering section. So you're able to build that out. So I think just conceptually breaking down, to your point, kind of that 3x3 structure, 2x3, whatever it is, depending on the number of features or products you have. That's kind of how, would that be the starting point, is figure out kind of how those fall?
Yeah, that's definitely the starting point. And it's not an easy process, right? I think there's something to internally looking at what you do, really thinking about your target audience, thinking about that intuitive grouping and structuring. Frictionless helps you kind of build that structure. But it is a complex process and often requires some real thought and some objectivity in the process as well, where you're stepping back and trying not to look at it as someone within your organization.
And how do you think the things that we focused on, like to this point, how does that play into offerings, since this all has to tie together?
Yeah, I mean, this is a progressive thing, right? As we started out with core values of who you are and what the ethos of your company is. We talked about vision. Where do you want to be? And how are you going to get there? And these other key things. And then offerings really moves to that next step of, okay, what is it that you do? And what do people want from you? And so I think this is one of those next logical steps that eventually, as we get into more messaging and these other things, having your offerings well defined, that now you've got, okay, who are we? Where are we trying to go? And what do we do? Those are three of those really big core questions, right? That now it is getting easier to answer. Why do people care about us? Which is kind of what we'll be getting into next.
Yeah, that's great. So do we want to dive in and take a look at offering section and Frictionless here?
Yeah, let's do it. Again, so in Frictionless, we've been talking about our strategy. What do we stand for? What those core values? Where are we going with vision and mission? And now we're talking about offerings. And I think there's a simple case to sometimes even in organizations, just having this documented is a powerful thing. I've done that in organizations before where, and we've talked about this in previous discussions, the team is not aligned and not everybody understands everything. And so I remember a scenario where I went into a company that offered a product with many modules and then different features within those. And you would be amazed how much the customer service team, even people within the product team, didn't have a clear vision of everything that their own product did and why people would even care about it. And so if foundationally your team doesn't have the same clear understanding of what you offer, why it's important to customers, and then how you articulate that to prospects and customers, talk about just such a fundamental gap in your organization. And so, again, kind of to the original point of just having this documented is, at the very least, a core minimum that most organizations surprisingly don't have, but they really should.
I think something else that it does is, like in this case, what you have are there are some services there. You have some organizations that are maybe primarily a service organization and they have a product that's an offshoot. This kind of allows you to develop the ecosystem so you can kind of see all of that together to that point of your internal team, right? So how is your customer service team or accounts team talking to your customers or clients about them? So having this document, it's really powerful. It's that map. And then everyone's starting from, there is like everyone is working from the same place, as opposed to, because I think in organizations often service offerings get kind of, oh, that's over, over here. It's somewhat separate, or the product is an offshoot. But your clients, your customers come in, they're not looking at it like that. They just need their solutions, right? And so they want to understand how the things work together. So there's some power in just having that defined and everyone on the same page.
And then that's where Frictionless comes in to help guide you. Again, as you're creating these, it really does force you down the path to create some hierarchy. Obviously, you need to think about how those are grouped. And then depending on what it is, whether it's a service, a product, a subproduct, a feature, we have developed specific questions that relate to, at least the core definitions of describe it at a high level. What are the benefits and outcomes? Why should that person believe or trust that you can produce these outcomes? And so it lets you document that at the base. But then what we've really got is the ability to write those messages for the outside world, something like a simple identifier for it, where it's almost that headline for a page of, if positioning is what we're talking about now, it says strategic market value definition for tech companies. And it's actually leveraging other data within Frictionless to combine what our offerings are with, what our unique focus is, which is, in our case, tech companies. And then even for this specific service that we're creating, that flag in the ground that we're actually going to talk about with as a company, but, why are you doing this? And so here you can see for our positioning, it came up with, we believe in the power of clear strategic communication with our unique methodology. So it's a core flag in the ground, and then you create an elevator pitch for it. When you create a positioning statement, which is the how. And so now, just by creating that hierarchy, having other information in the system, and then filling out some curated questions, you're able to start iterating on your messaging that you can use in sales materials, websites, whatever it might be, for this one service. And so, especially when you think of it, that if we've got, whether it's services or products that have different modules or service groups, and then sub-services or sub-features and all these things, the ability to define that and then answer some simple questions and then create some really strong messaging that then can be used by your entire team in different channels. This helps you really get that clarity and alignment that you can then bring everybody in your team around, so that they are all speaking the same language when they're talking about a service or a feature or a group or whatever it might be.
It's excellent. And then just to clarify, so if you have a product, let's say you're selling a single product, looking at this, you hear offerings, you could think, oh, well, we don't have multiple products or services. We're just offering a single product. But this can even be done for your key features, which I think is important, because you're going to be speaking, if you're speaking to a customer, you're going to be speaking about those features, and you're going to need language and the consistency across your teams to do that.
And it's built out that way, that when you come in, you kind of define, oh, we're a single product with 10 features, or we're a platform that has 5 modules, and each of those modules has 6 features. That process is here to help you create that. And then, like you said, you may have a single product with a list of features, and then each of those features really should have all of this messaging. You should have your entire team understand, for X feature within our product, what is the we believe statement? What is the elevator pitch of, what is it? And then what is the positioning statement of how do we do it better than anybody else? Even individual features should have that if you're a single product. And so this really does support whether you're a hyper complex organization with many modules, services, and service groups, or you're a single product and a single offering that has just pieces that you need to communicate to your outside audience.
Yeah, that's great. So that's some super foundational definition to offerings, I should say. Really good stuff. And I think this is an exercise that isn't always that deeply thought through the whole offerings, architecture, messaging, all of that. Sometimes it's the higher overarching messaging that everyone's focusing on, but this is some in the weeds, really important stuff.
And then I just popped in here, with Frictionless, the great thing is it helps you kind of continue that process with messaging. Here, what it's done is created some different messages based off of our internal details, our positioning, who we are as a company that we've set in other places. And so you can see for positioning, strategize and win with us. We help you define your market value standing out amongst your competitors. And so it starts to help you define some headlines and other text, simple things, your success, our mission. I mean, I think this really helps folks, again, kind of leveraging the right data and the right questions, AI and our methodology that we've been using for years to really produce some valuable stuff within, as you saw, seconds.
Yeah, that's awesome. Good stuff here. We're kind of moving into that next progression. On the next show, we're going to be talking value propositions. So going further on all this stuff. Again, things go, all these things are, the importance of it is the alignment. I think that's why we call the platform frictionless, right? You need to reduce the friction throughout. So we'll dive into that next time, but thank you everyone for tuning in. And again, we'll see you on the next show.
This episode of the Vision Gap Show has been brought to you by Frictionless. Build high-impact strategy at scale. Create your vision, brand position, and go-to-market strategy. All in a collaborative AI-enabled workspace. Visit frictionlesshq.com to create your free account today.